Vergara and talking about the capsule model for moving individuals.
Thank you very much. I would like to correct Ricardo Carrizo Vergara, two family names. So I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the Swiss Ornithological Institute. I would like to thank very much the organizers of this workshop for accepting my abstract. I saw Anomalous Diffusions. I was caring about studying some models for animal movement and particularly not so normal animal movements, so I was interested by it, and I thought I have a model already, or a kind of a principle for constructing model rather than a model, that is actually a kind of not normal diffusion, because you capture the individuals that move, and even if the individuals moving, you model them as a normal diffusion. The general population that you obtain finally is a slowed down, an amortized diffusion, so technically it's anomalous. So I sent the abstract and it was accepted, so thank you very much. So I will tell you more about this model. First, where was our motivations for this? We were in the context where we wanted to study in the Vogelwarte, in the Swiss Ornithological Institute, the spread of and colonization of populations. So when they colonize a new landscape, usually when they're entered, and how that changed depending on which species, how fast they move, what are their habits in landscape use, etc. And the models we wanted to apply are what are called in statistical ecology ecological diffusion kind of models, which, very roughly speaking, are statistical models that assume an average deterministic behavior, which is solution to some diffusion equation. Here. And the statistical model around it are errors, modeled somehow there are many manners, but finally all independent errors around this average model. And we wanted to fit these models to abundance data and compare if we could do better with other kind of movement-based models where an explicit movement of individuals is modeled, and whatever if it works better, worse, or is more adapted than these models. And we had a very inspirational data set, which wasn't on birds, but on flies. They fly anyway, which was filled to us, the data set by our collaborator, Trevor Heffley, who worked in this experimental scenario called, which is, you can consult in this bioarchive paper, Scaling Up, Understanding Movement from Individual Difference to Population Level Dispersion. So a bunch of ecologists, biologists, and statisticians worked out this idea of trying to model the spread of a particular populations, how different strains, genetic strains of the same species can have different habits in terms of colonization, different behavior rather than habits. And the data set consists in an experiment. So they have a meadow of 100 times 100 meters over a landscape with a lot of traps. The traps, you see the blue pixels here, each pixel is a trap, so there are a lot of traps, 227 to be precise, in a very particular configuration they choose because of reasons, don't ask me that. And in the center, in a kind of center, there are a lot of these Drosophila melanogaster of different strain types, flies, that they will release. And after some irregular times, they will count how many of these flies are in the different traps. And so they go after half an hour, after an hour and a half, 21 hours, etc. It's very regular how they did the sampling of the final count. And this is the data. How many how many flies were in each trap at each time of the count? And with this data, you see a little bit the pictures and and what they thought. Well, a kind of diffusion model may be reasonable here because you see kind of an expanding population or expanding covering of the population. And they tried that. And in this context, what did we try after they did all of this? In this paper, which has all the information of what I'm telling you today and what I will tell you today and more, we tried two stuff. We took a subset of this data set and we wanted to test an underlying movement model, to be precise and fast, Brownian motion, simple, fitted to the data, but to the broader scale count data of the individual's movement with some detection error. And we wanted to compare the result to an associated ecotype model with a simple diffusion PDE, which both models compares the same average behavior. So personally, as a geostatistician, I thought the movement induces a space-time autocorrelation structure. So it gives more information than a simple average study of the statistical model. And the result in this data set, both comparable models, produced very different results. So I was very disappointed. I want to enter into the details further in this presentation if you need. Anyway, everything is here. But what I proposed to our colleagues is, let's try a new model, more realistic and more adapted to the situation. And that's where we took into account that the things are being captured. And when you don't take that into account, you probably underestimate everything that tells you something about how fast the population may colonize the area. And we wanted a more realistic and mechanistic model that takes into account the underlying movement of individuals, the capture procedure in traps, and the cumulative in time information that you have in your final abundance data. What you have in a trap is not the individuals that are there at that moment, is they were captured before. And that's different as an information than just counting points that move. So, and finally, we need to fit that to data. So let's propose the model, which with an approach that I call axiomatic approach. So rather than saying we will use this underlying trajectory, this distribution for the time of capture, etc., we will propose simple, intuitive to us actions, following mechanistics and some, I like to call it epistemological, I will show you why, ideas then. And obtain from there the properties of our statistical model. So let's go to the model in itself, some notation for the distribution of a random variable, and for the measure, I use mix, whether it is vectorial or not, and I use this abuse of notation even for y continuous in the conditional. I know like this is just an abuse of notation. For the model in itself, we're in a scenario with an initial time, everything happens after that, and individuals moving in Euclidean space with, and there are traps forming a capture domain. They can be captured and retained. And I'm going to make the very simplified and abusive IID assumption. The movement of and the capture of the n individuals are supposed to be independent and identically distributed. So finally, we focus on what happens in one typical individual. And three key concepts behind this model. First, the time of capture of the individual, continuous random variable. The effective trajectory. So the effective trajectory means the actual, it tries to represent the actual trajectory that the individual follows. It's a stochastic process and continuous time. And then another auxiliary stochastic process, which is kind of an invention, an artificial speculative variable, which intends to represent the hypothetical trajectory the individual would have followed if there were no capture procedure. It's a weird concept because it is a completely speculative variable. You cannot have data for this. So technically you can choose the model, whatever model you want. But this is where the modeling part, the choose of the model, will help us. So let's see the axioms. Right now, how do we connect all these models to finally propose a well-defined stochastic model for the situation? First, we will suppose a connection between the free and effective trajectories. So before being captured, the individual follows the free trajectory move. And after being captured, is retained at the same position when it was captured. So this is a kind of intuitive, if you want to say it like that. So, and there is a deterministic connection between the three objects x, x tilde, and tc. So we can only focus on these two, x tilde and tc, to model stochastically. And the three big axioms of this model are the following. First, no capture possibility. Even if you visit the capture domain, the individual may not be captured. This we did it because there are a lot of flights that are never captured even if they go over a flight. So we needed something like this. And what do I mean with this? This capture time is an extended real random variable. It can be infinite. And what I mean with capture time being infinite, it means it's another way of saying the guy was never captured. So it's another event we had. So we have the extended real random variable. Second, stationary rate of growth probability of capture action, I should add, while visiting the capture domain. So given that you're visiting the capture domain and then you're free, the instantaneous probability of being captured is equal to a constant, which doesn't depend on t, so it is stationary, and bigger than 0. So this supposition gives us a parameter for our model, which is this alpha. The bigger the alpha is, the faster you capture in individuals, your traps are more effective. And this one is my favorite one because it's weird. Capture position information action. If I ask myself, what information gives me about the free trajectory, the fact of knowing that the individual was captured at a given time, I answer, it gives me no more, no less, than the information that knowing that the individual was at the capture domain at that time. So I essentially replace this for this. And this action actually gives us a conditional distribution for the free trajectory given the capture time. Therefore, we think with these three conditions, maybe we have defined completely the model. And that's the result that I want to share with you, the theorem that is presented in the same paper that I have been talking all along. If we suppose mild conditions on the trajectories, first that at every time after the initial release, the probability of visiting the capture domain is bigger than 0. So for every Gaussian process, it should be okay, for example. And a continuity condition on the trajectory, which is actually over the bivariate distribution of the trajectory at 2 given times and the presence in the capture domain. This function must be continuous over the open set. If you have that, then, and you satisfy the axioms, of course, then there is only one possibility as a probability distribution for the capture time, and this distribution has a continuous density over the open set, the open time interval, which is the solution to a Volterra integral equation of the second kind, and this is the Volterra integral equation in game for the density of the capture time. And you see alpha is involved as the typical coefficient that appears in this kind of equations. There is the probability of presence of the free trajectory to the capture domain, and there is this conditional kernel that appears for belonging to the capture domain at a given time, given that previously the individual was also there. What is mathematically, what is important to remark here, something important theoretically, this gives uniqueness, not existence. That means I haven't proved in general that I can always construct this random variable, because I cannot prove, I don't know personally how to prove yet in all scenarios if this thing, the solutions of this Volterra equation of these particular forms always are densities of extended real random variables, are always positive with total integral minus or equal than 1. And that's the remark I wanted to show. In our work, we proved that that existence can be guaranteed in cases, for example, where alpha is small enough with respect to one horizon time, and that was enough for our application purpose. So, with this known, we can start making questions. Like, there are examples for this case. There are two. I propose two examples for with analytical solution. The first kind of trivial case when the whole thing is a trap, so the capture domain is the whole space. Your Volterra equation becomes like this, and therefore the solution is necessarily an exponential. Your capture time is an exponential random variable. A second, less trivial, but still enough simple case. Imagine you have an individual escaping from the origin in a selected random direction and velocity modeled by a Gaussian vector, for example, IID Gaussian vector in this case. And your capture domain is a circle around the origin. So from some point, the individual may escape definitely. Then you have this form of the Volterra equation which involves the cumulative distribution function of a k-squared random variable. And the explicit solution is given like this. You have the exponential times this cumulative distribution function evaluated somehow. And in this case, you have the particularity that actually the individual may not be captured. So out here, in the exponential case, you have 0. You will be eventually captured. I also prepared numerical examples where I solved the Volterra equation with a simple Riemann sums approximation, but with more complicated capture domains. Here I used the square and different scenarios for dispersion with a simple Brownian motion as a free trajectory for fast and slow dispersals, and high and not that high rates of growth of probability of capture. So you may see the difference at different scenarios. Here we have a square capture domain. Here we have at the frame of a square, so you see that at the beginning there is no probability of capture because at the origin there is no traps, but then it grows and then it decays because individuals may escape the frame and some of them will not. Another more interesting to see that you don't have monotony or unimodal behavior. You may have complicated capture domains with square and frames and have things like this. And the one that I was caring about is the one for application, which is kind of complicated and it looks like this. So, given that, our guy is an anomalous diffusion. I did the work of computing what you like the most in here, which is the square, the various, this guy, you like it. And you don't want it to be linear because if not, it will be normal. Here is amortized in the example of a Brownian motion with the exponential case, so very simple, where we can have an analytical solution. In general, you have this description for the unitemporal marginal distribution of the atypical individual. So you have the free trajectory plus something extra, which involves all the things that are obtained from the Volterra equation. So I have a few minutes extra, I guess. This is an example of a simulation that I put it because it's beautiful. But what's important is that the kind of data that we're aiming to fit is abundance data. So here you have the example of an underlying Brownian motion with 1,000 individuals, and here the abundance data that is getting generated from this field, and there is an advection here. So you see that the kind of forms that are obtained are far from being like the circle that we're used to see in the case of normal diffusions. So I'm going to go fast in the application of the abundance data set. We use it as subsample of only two times to analyze. We had some reasons for it. Irregular times 0.5, 1.5, and only focus on one type of flies, the rovers, for which we have more than 5,000 individuals. So this is the data itself if you wanted to see it. And we use an underlying free trajectory Brownian motion with a possible advection to try to fit this abundance data. And since we need a model for the abundance field, the count of individuals actually trapped, we have a problem that this vector, if we give different locations, sets, and times, this vector actually has an intricate joint distribution, for which we also made a description in this work, and we call it the evolving categories multinomial distribution. But what's important for us right now is that for us, at least in our state of knowledge, is the likelihood is untractable, so we need an extra fitting technique. And what I did is, I don't know the likelihood, but we know the mean behavior. We have a expected value and a covariance structure for the abundance field, given by these formulas, and they're obtained thanks to this function obtained from the Volterra equation. And okay, we know mean structure, covariance structure, and a big number of individuals, so we call our beloved central limit theorem, and we assume our data Gaussian, try to fit with that. And this is an example of simulation studies with this idea, 300 simulations and trying to obtain retrieve original parameters for our model. In general, you see asymptotically consistency empirically, but you always underestimate the spread parameter. That's important to remark. Always get it, and the bias gets better with time, with n, sorry, but you always get it. So very fast, we compared the three models that we used, the CODIF snapshot, which you had as underlying movement, and the capture. And as predicted, we estimated that the spread parameters and the advection vectors are higher in magnitude than the others. And in terms of log likelihood with this method, actually it was better than the others, terms in absolute Gaussian likelihood or continuity corrected. I'm going to step out the conclusions. I prefer to give some time for questions, so I'm going to leave it until there, and thank you very much.
Questions?
Sorry, didn't you make an ideal assumption at some point in your theory for the traps?
For the traps, no.
Oh, you didn't.
The idea assumptions is in the movement of the different individuals that are in the landscape. So assuming all the flies, for example, get out and they move independently. But the traps, no, the traps are just there, or the capture domain, if you want, is there.
Okay, so the traps can have any arbitrary structure because obviously in your experiment they were structured in a very particular way, right?
Yes.
That's why I'm asking.
That's the magic. The capture domain, I have no big assumptions on how it can be. There is only this continuity that has to be in the presence of the free trajectory to the capture domain. Yes.
Are the traps sort of like on the floor or hanging from in the sky? Because I assume they fly around in 3 dimensions.
Yeah.
How much of a difference do you think that would make to the results?
I mean, it should be different. In this case, the traps are low and small. Actually, at the center of each one of these square, there is the trap, which is not big, but we interpreted the whole square surrounding the trap as a capture domain. A single trap is a simplification of the context. But if you make 3D, well, theoretically you can. Computationally is more difficult. You can, but you will have to add the extra parameters for your three-dimensional behavior of the flies. It's possible. It's not the case that we did here. We neglected that. This is a 2D projection if you want. And in that scenario, probably if the fly enters the trap, you cannot say that it may get out. It will surely be captured. And that's important. That's our difference with this scenario. Since this is a projection, the fly can go over the trap and then continue. And it's a small difference there.
Makes sense.
Thank you very much.
No, it's okay.
No.
So can I just ask you? So try to understand if I got your model. So it seems like you have a set of partial absorbing traps, and then I can compute, coming from a different background. So I compute the first passage to either of these, but they are partial absorbed, so they can go over, come back, and not being absorbed until it's. So that would be the way I would set up the problem, okay, and find the survival probability, and then of course you have a complication. There are many individuals and so on, but you can also still do that. So what is it that one gains if goes your way rather than, the standard, let's say, problem of first passage? It's a first passage problem you're talking about, or first absorption problem, partial, because you have partial absorption of the trap. Do you know what's the difference?
I don't know that literature, to be honest. I've heard about first passages, but that's like when you visit for the first time a domain. What happens there?
No, but then you can actually naturally implement a partial absorption at the location, at many of the locations you have. So it's without any problem. And they could be all different, the partial absorption and all this. So.
Okay, in principle, I don't know how different this kind of approach would be. The models issued from that kind of approach would be to this one. In principle, I don't know.
Because the structure at the end that you show on the mu-x, it's precisely the free diffusion plus some additional object which you get.
That one.
Yeah. So then, it looks like it's like a renewal version. Yeah. So it made me think immediately that this.
Okay.
Of course, also your problem physically does represent the first passage.
Okay.
We can discuss later. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.